Come here, Zola. Come here. Do you want to say anything to the camera? No, you're just looking for the treats. You know they're here. You want to help me record a video? Alright then. Hello and welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing well, and welcome to the second week in a row where I'm opening on my floor. Which is kind of weird when you think about how much I actually record my face, but hi. Come here. Last week, a lot of you guys loved my baby here, and I'm very happy about that because I had planned for this video to come out this month, and I knew she had to be the star of her own video. I have seen this a few times on YouTube. I believe the first one I saw was of Super Ray Dizzle. She did a video like this. Hello there! I'm not quite sure who else has done this, but this is not an original idea at all. I thought it would be fun. This has been on my list of things to do on YouTube for a while now. But basically, this little one here, little Miss Zola Bear, she is going to pick what I draw today. I have these little cards, right? Yes, these are what you're going to be sniffing. They each have some stuff on it. We got like paints, alcohol markers, colored pencils, etc. I'm going to take her treats. You gotta put them underneath or on top. I don't know, we'll see how it goes. Each of these, in whichever one she sniffs first, that's what I'm doing. I'm not quite sure what the rules are, and I mean, I guess I'm making them up because this is my channel and I can do what I want. I decided what I am going to draw. It's a picture of me and this little one. Are you ready? Want to help me film? Are you ready to film a video? I'm gonna have you leave the room. No, this is the opposite of leaving the room. Oh yeah, I was wearing a hood because I didn't get a haircut, and then I just took the hood off, so I just completely ruined the purpose of the hood. But also, I may or may not magically get a haircut sometime during the filming of this. You gotta leave now. I'm gonna set up, and then you'll be back in a second, okay? She's gone, but she's sniffing out the door, so I'm gonna make this quick. First up, we're going to decide which one I'm going to be using to draw with. That wasn't a sentence, but we're gonna move on. I've got alcohol markers, I've got colored pencils, and paint. And I just wrote paint because I have acrylic paints, watercolor paints, and gouache paints. So if she picks this, then we will... I know, Zola, you'll come in here in a minute. If she picks paints, then I will have her decide what paints I'm using, but for now, we're gonna be doing this. We'll try putting them underneath, and we'll see what happens, but I mean... Zola Bear, come here! She sniffed a colored pencils right away! So we're working with colored pencils today. I'm really happy I didn't have to show her how to do it. She just kind of got it right away, because admittedly, there are times where she's not the brightest bulb in the box. She's not the brightest bulb in the shed. So we're working with colored pencils today. I have quite a few different types of paper. I have cardstock, Bristol, marker paper, and watercolor paper. But then for cardstock, I also have it in a few different colors. I have white, I have brown, I have black, and I have gray. If she picks cardstock, I'll have her pick a color too, but we'll see how that goes. Zola Bear, you ready? Pick one. Watercolor paper. She did hit marker paper after, but she did hit watercolor paper first. So it's in my hand. So colored pencils and watercolor paper. I actually do have colored pencils, so maybe I will ask her in all of her wisdom if I should use colored pencils just as colored pencils, or if she will allow me to use watercolor pencils as watercolors. Yes will mean yes, I can use them as watercolors. No means only use them like colored pencils. Which one? Pick one! Zola, look, pick one! No. Okay, we have to use them as just colored pencils, no watercolor allowed. Honestly, I think it might take to watercolor paper fairly easily since it is more textured and you typically want a little bit more texture with colored pencils, but it's a little bit more textured than I typically go for, so we will see how that goes. She doesn't understand the concept of me having a job that I do, so she doesn't understand what's happening right now. All she knows is that she's running back and forth and getting treats for it. Next up, I'm going to ask her if I'm going to use fine liners or not, and then I'm going to ask her if I'm going to use a white gel pen or not. I'm not sure I would prefer fine liners. When I use colored pencils, I typically go all colored pencils, but we'll see what she wants. And then I would prefer to have a white gel pen, but again, we will see what she wants. Zola Bear, pick one. Are we gonna use fine liners or not? Is that a bear? Come here. What? She found one! Alright, yes, we are going to be using fine liners. Oh, I know, you just keep getting locked out. I feel so bad. Yes for gel pen, no for no gel pen. Please let me use a gel pencil, I'm begging you. Go on, pick one. You know, you picked this up so easily. No gel pen? With colored pencils, I'll usually have no fine liners and then a white gel pen. She wants me to use fine liners and have no white gel pen. You're really throwing me for a loop here, buddy. I usually will use some washi tape as like a decorative element to my drawings. We are going to ask Almighty Zola Bear if we are going to use washi tape to decorate the drawing or no washi tape. Pick one. Pick one. Can you pick one? She almost picked a no. Oh! She tricked us out! She picked a yes! Bit. We have one more thing we gotta decide, okay? Our regular viewer on my channel, you might know, this little one is a bit of a fashion icon. She has a number of outfits, all of which are incredible. So since I am going to be drawing a picture of the two of us, we are going to be deciding if she's going to wear a nice outfit, and if so, she's going to pick which one. Hi there. Or if she's gonna go au naturel in the drawing. Clothed, naked. She's so confused. She keeps sniffing between them. Oh my god, you've done this before. Not a thought in her. Up! She wants to be naked! To recap, we are drawing with colored pencils on watercolor paper. We are using fine liners. We are not using a white gel pen. We can't use watercolor pencils as watercolors. We're using them as colored pencils only. We are using washi tape. Thank you for helping me. I'll take it over from here, okay? You're looking for more treats? There's no more, that's it. Thank you for helping me. You don't even care, you just want treats. Alright, well, I will move over to my desk. I will start drawing, and then by the time we are done, I will bring her in, show her the finished product. Not that she's gonna care, she's just gonna think that there's a treat under it now. But I'll try and get some reaction out of her. Maybe I'll get a haircut, I don't know, you'll have to stay tuned to find out. Alright, take it over, voiceover Oliver. So like every good drawing, I decided a great place to start would be to gather my supplies, because you can't draw anything without anything to draw with. Some words of wisdom right here. I decided to go with my Strathmore watercolor paper. I actually have two kinds. There's this Strathmore one, and then I have some B watercolor paper. I decided to use the Strathmore mostly because since I was going to use colored pencils on it rather than watercolor paper, I'd used the one that I liked less. I don't have too much of the B watercolor paper, and I haven't really seen it in stores, so I'm just kind of saving it for whenever I do use watercolors. So the Strathmore it is. The original size of the paper was 9 by 12, I believe, and I decided to cut that in half. I also decided to sketch out the base layer with some Colorace colored pencils on the back of the other half of the watercolor paper. So when I cut it in half, I set one aside for the actual illustration, and then on the back of the other one, I made some little thumbnails. I just divided it into fours, made our little thumbnails. These didn't take very long. I think in total it just took me like no longer than 3 minutes to sketch out each of them. Probably even less than that, but I decided to go with the last one. The last two were almost the same. It was mostly just figuring out exactly where to put the legs and the hands and all of that, but I thought that this would be a fun little composition for the drawing, and so with that, I set that sheet aside, grabbed the other half, and started getting to work. Like I mentioned, I used Colorace colored pencils to sketch the base layer in. Normally when I work with colored pencils, like I said earlier, I usually just go all colored pencils. What I mean by that is if I were working like in my sketchbook or something and I was making a finished colored pencil illustration, I would have also sketched in the colored pencils I used to actually color it, so not the Colorace ones. But for this one, since I was trying to make it look a little bit more neat and tidy, I decided to use the Colorace. Basically, the only time I really do finished colored pencil illustration, if I ever do them, is in my sketchbook, and so I'm not worried about things looking messier. I'm not worried about proportions being accurate. I'm not worried about anatomy being accurate. I'm not worried about getting the composition exactly right because it's just a drawing in my sketchbook. But since this was going to be a finished illustration, I wanted something a little bit more erasable so I can really nail down those details. Colorist colored pencils aren't super erasable, but they are more erasable than regular colored pencils, so I decided to just lay the base in that. And then after that, I got to work with the colored pencils. I don't have the widest selection of colored pencils. My colored pencil collection is in this weird spot where it's like, I wouldn't say that I have a lot, but I also definitely don't have just a little. And so that said, it was a little bit more difficult to get the colors exactly how I needed them to be. I think the most notable part for this is the jacket that I'm wearing, or like the button-down shirt. Of course, I drew myself in the clothes that my avatar is wearing, and these are clothes that I actually own, but the button-down is actually a much more desaturated green, but all of my more desaturated greens were a little bit too dark to use as just like the regular tone, so the button down ended up being a lot more bright and vibrant than it actually is. And also a side note, before I forget to mention it, I ended up losing the footage where I colored in the hair. I filmed that in real time, but I ended up losing the footage, and by losing it, I mean I accidentally deleted it off my camera. But we'll just pretend that it magically got lost and it wasn't my fault. It's fine. It's not like I liked the hair or anything. I wanted to show you guys how I did that. It's fine, we don't need it. I'm not upset about it. Using colored pencils, like I said, as a finished illustration isn't something that I do a whole lot, but also that said, it did also take me less time than, say, like an alcohol marker illustration would take me. Usually when I do make finished illustrations, it's typically alcohol-based markers or digital art, but if it's not either of those, it's probably watercolor or gouache. And yet at the same time, this still didn't take me as long as doing any of those would have taken me. Whenever I make digital art, each piece takes me roughly 5 hours, like 5 to 6 hours. Alcohol markers take me about the same time. With watercolors and gouache, if we're excluding drawing time, it takes me a little bit less, maybe like 4 hours. This one took me, I don't remember the exact time, but it took me somewhere between 2 to 3 hours. A big part of that is probably because I was using colored pencils. It's a lot more difficult, at least for me personally, to get those smaller details when I use colored pencils. And of course, I had to layer them and I had to blend them and try to make them as smooth as I could possibly get them to be. There's still only so much details that I could get in with these colored pencils. And I don't have a whole lot of experience with like a variety of brands of colored pencils. And from my understanding, Prismacolor is like the ideal colored pencils. They are like the go-to for a lot of artists. And I guess you could say that they're industry standard for a lot of colored pencils, but even that said, you can only layer them so many times. So eventually it did get to the point where I was having a harder and harder time layering them, and so if there's a section of the drawing that I wasn't particularly happy with, I kind of just had to let it go. And I think that this is something that I wouldn't have had an issue with if I did make more finished illustrations with colored pencils more often. With digital art, if you don't like something, it's so much easier to change it. You can delete it, make a new layer, duplicate layers, do whatever you need to do. And then with alcohol markers, it's not necessarily easy to make changes, but since I am a lot more experienced with that, I guess you could say I'm less likely to make like mistakes that are drastically noticeable. But with colored pencils, since I do have a lot less experience with that, it's a bit of a different situation. As far as the end project goes, I'm not dissatisfied with it. I do like the way that it turned out, but A, I don't think it's like my best work ever, and B, I also don't think it really looks like my art style. I do think that it's really common for artists to have their style vary from media to media, and I am absolutely no exception to that. My art looks different when I do it digitally, from when I use alcohol markers, from when I use watercolor, to when I use gouache, whatever it may be. But that said, whenever I do use those mediums, I still think that it looks like my art. But for this one, I just don't think, for the most part, it really looks like I made it. And I can't really put my finger on why. I know for one, the facial proportions the facial proportions are definitely different from what I would typically do, and I also had a really hard time figuring out how to draw Miss Zola Bear with colored pencils, because whenever I draw animals, it's usually either a sketch or alcohol markers. But also that said, I don't really draw animals often, so I don't think that's entirely a colored pencil thing. That's mostly just me not exactly knowing how to draw animals thing. But overall, using colored pencils like this was really fun. It's not something that I do super often, but also it's not something that I dislike doing, so using colored pencils in a finished illustration like this is really fun. I actually think this is the first time on my channel where I've had a speed paint of a colored pencil illustration that's just strictly colored pencil. I don't know, I feel like you guys remember my videos better than I do, so you can let me know if that's true. Or at the very least, it's the only one where the speed paint is dedicated to me using colored pencils. Typically, whenever I do use them, it's more of just an accent. Another thing I wanted to mention is that I do have 2 different brands of colored pencils. Of course, we have the Prismacolors, which is what I am using in this video, and then the other brand, I can't quite remember them, but there are these woodless colored pencils, and I decided to leave those out. I really, really like the way they feel for sketching, and I like the way that they take to paper, but if I'm using them within each other, like, they layer okay. It's definitely not as good as, like, Prismacolor, but then whenever I use them with Prismacolor, it does not layer at all. Like, I'll try to layer it on top of the Prismacolor and it just doesn't stick, and then I'll try to layer Prismacolor on top of those ones, and those also don't stick. So I decided to just save myself the trouble and use my Prismacolors just from beginning to end. And speaking of using them, I was definitely right about the paper. Using them on watercolor paper wasn't the worst experience in the world, but also that said, I don't think I'd do it again. Watercolor paper is just a bit too textured for using colored pencils on their own. And whenever you do use colored pencils, or any sort of pencil really, you typically want a little bit of texture to your paper because that gives the pencil something to actually grip onto. But then with watercolor paper, this is an example of paper that's a little bit too textured. You'll probably notice it throughout the drawing, but whenever I would use them, I would color just how I typically use colored pencils. I would put one layer down, maybe another layer of a different color if I'm feeling real crazy, and then I'll blend it out, and then I'll shade, and then I'll blend it out as I go. But for this one, since it is super textured, there is like little white specks where the colored pencil just basically missed a part of the paper. I tried to fix that as I went along, but this is why you don't want the most textured paper when you're using colored pencil. You want a little bit of texture, but not a whole lot of texture, so it's a little bit of a fine line. If I were using my watercolored pencils and using them like watercolors, that would be a bit of a different situation, but Zola deemed that not necessary for this drawing. Even though I would disagree, but that's what she wanted, so that's what we're doing. By the time I was done with the colored pencils, it was time to move on to the fine liners, and I don't know if you've ever used fine liners on top of colored pencils, but it's not the best experience in the world. It doesn't go super well on top of colored pencils, but then also you kind of have to do it after you put the pencil down. Otherwise, because of the pigment in the colored pencil, it would just completely cover the liner as you went, so I had to save it for the end, but they don't layer on top of colored pencils nicely, and I actually ended up ruining one of my liners in this drawing, so thanks for that, Zola. This is literally the exact opposite of what I usually do when I use colored pencils. I'll use no liner, I'll just use a colored pencil as a liner, and then I'll use a white gel pen. But it pained me to use liners on this, and it pained me to not have a white gel pen. When I was done with the colored pencils, I set all of them aside except for the white. When I was done with the fine liner, I tried to use that as sort of a white highlight, but because of how much I had already layered the colored pencils, it didn't really work that well, so that was a bust. So in the end, I decided to just use the liner where I felt it was really needed. The most significant places is defining my facial details and then my shoes, and then I think I also used it on Zola more than I did myself. But I tried to use it fairly sparingly. A lot of it went into the face and the hair, but after that it was just wherever I thought something needed to be defined a little bit more. So it didn't really take me long at all to finish the lining. Once I was done with that, I brought over the washi tape that I picked out. I decided to leave this one to me because if I let Zola pick this, who knows what she would have come up with all my collection of washi tape. It would have been a nightmare, so I decided to pick it myself. I decided to go with this green one that has like some flowers and also birds with crowns. They're very good boys. And then this black and white striped one because I thought that matched with my outfit a little bit more. Usually I'll spend a little bit of time thinking about how I want to lay the tape down. It's not something that you can exactly thumbnail, quote unquote. I don't know if that's a great way to explain it, but you can't really like put it down and then lift it up and put it down in a different spot and then lift it up and then put it down in a different spot because washi tape already on its own isn't super sticky, and so it would very quickly lose this adhesive, and as you'll probably probably see later on in the video in a little bit, the striped tape keeps popping up. And in fact, as I'm recording this, I've already lost a piece, so I'll have to redo that later. But that wasn't really an issue this time for me because I pretty much knew exactly where I wanted to put the tape, so I just slapped that down. We were done in a matter of minutes. Like I said, I don't dislike this drawing. I think it was rather fun. I think it's fun to do something like this every now and again, but that said, it's not something that I would really make on my own. I guess that's part of the fun of it, but even though I'm satisfied with the end result, I like it. I think it's nice. I also can't say I want to repeat the experience I had while making this. Here's the finished thing. Let me know your thoughts on it. I definitely tried my best given what Zola gave me. And speaking of Zola, here's her reaction. Have fun with that. Hello, it's me. Here's that magical haircut that I mentioned. I magically got one, not from someone who cuts hair. It was magic. I'm gonna show her thing. Hopefully she likes it. And if she doesn't, she has nobody to blame but herself. Go to a place where the lighting is an absolute garbage. Also, I'm recording this on my phone, so then that way I don't have to carry around a microphone, because lazy. Come here. There she is. Come here, I want to show you something. Look. Do you like it? He helps me make it. Wow. Look, that's you. Wow! Did you just see that disrespect? I cannot believe this. Do you even care at all? If I don't to react at all, can you at least help me on the video? Zola, can you say thank you for watching? Can you say you feel like this video? Give it a thumbs up? Can you pay attention? Can you pretend to care at least? Can you say if you're new here, consider subscribing because we post a new video every Wednesday. Yes, we do. But anyways, hello, I am Oliver. This is Zola. I post new videos here every single Wednesday, and I make a lot of art on this channel, so if you want to see any of that, stick around. I'm very distracted by you right now, Zola. If you want to see more from me, consider following me on social media. Right, Zola? Those will be on screen right over here, and they'll be linked in the description box below. Isn't that right, Zola? I post my art to Instagram, occasionally Twitter, but go check out those. Can you say that there's going to be some videos on screen now and linked in the iCard? Wow. Kita, thank you for watching. We'll see you next week, right, Zola? Right, Zola? I'll see you next week. Bye.